City Council. Whoop, and I'll do that again. Calling to order the meeting of the City Council for January 24th at about 6:33 p.m. Before we begin and take a roll call, we have an issue with one of our council members that I would like to ask our city attorney to explain the procedure to allow our remote city council member to participate in today's meeting.
Yes, Mayor. So pursuant to Brown Act considerations, teleconferencing is authorized under emergency procedures for members of the legislative body who are unable for emergency circumstances to attend in person. This would require a notice to the legislative body at the earliest possible time, which at this time is this moment, and consideration by the members of the legislative body for that member unable to participate in person to participate via teleconferencing under purposes of the Brown Act requirements. So the council at this time, per your direction, may consider attendance by the council member unable to attend in person, council member Carroll, and make that determination for emergency attendance on Zoom.
Okay, and my understanding is Councilmember Carroll is dealing with some health issues and is unable to be here today for that reason. With that in mind, I would make a motion pursuant to what was just explained by our city attorney to allow City Councilmember Carroll to participate in tonight's meeting through Zoom.
I'll second that.
Can we get a roll call vote on that, please?
Councilmember Carroll,
Yes.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Way.
Yes.
Mayor Candell.
Yes. Okay, now that we have Councilmember Carroll with us, why don't we do a roll call?
Councilmember Carroll,
Here.
Councilmember Paulson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Way.
Yes. Here.
Mayor Candell.
I am here.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to note pursuant to the Brown Act, because you do have a member participating by teleconference, you are required to open up the teleconference resource to the public. So should there be a member of the public participating by teleconference this evening because the council members participating, they will be entitled to participate online.
Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to ask our city clerk when we have matters open to the public, if you could please check and see if somebody has their hand raised online so we can make sure they have an opportunity to speak. Okay, having that in mind, if you are able, please rise so we can do a pledge. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for the public to address City Council on a member not on the agenda tonight. If it is on the agenda, please hold your comments until the agenda item is called. Having said that, is there anyone in the chambers that would like to address the council with public comment? Come on up.
James Holmes, Larkspur. I'm delighted that Councilmember Carroll can join you by Zoom and that other folks can also join by Zoom. And I certainly would have taken that opportunity on this rainy night if I could have. So I am hopeful that the council will extend that privilege on a continuing basis for the same reason that Councilmember Carroll was able to avail himself of it. And a lot of the rest of us, particularly us seniors, would like to be able to do that because, again, it seemed like otherwise we were having a meeting where Zoom comment was not permitted. If my understanding is not correct and we are going forward to allow Zoom comment, that I would love to be corrected on that. If not, I would again request the council to please extend to other people on an ongoing basis the same prerogative that is, or the same privilege that is being extended to Councilmember Carroll tonight. so that Larkspur citizens and residents, along with the residents of the great majority of other towns and special districts, will be able to address the council without having to come forward before you. It's a vital pleasure, privilege and a pleasure, and all of those other agencies appear to be able to deal with the exigencies of screwballs and others. I would like to see this council rise to that occasion on a continuing basis and not just when a council member cannot make it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments from the chamber? Madam City Clerk, is there anyone online with a hand raised that would like to make a comment tonight?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members, and there's no public comment.
Okay. With no public comment remaining, I will close public comment. We will move to the next agenda item, which is presentations and proclamations, of which there are none this evening. Moving on to approval of the consent calendar. Is there anyone from the city council who would like to pull an item? There's only one item on the consent calendar. Would anybody like to pull an item to discuss? Would anyone in the audience like to pull pull an item from the consent calendar to discuss? Is there anyone online who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar to discuss?
I'm looking for any raised hands, and there is no one from online.
Okay, with that in mind, can I ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll move the consent calendar.
Second.
Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Carroll. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Way.
Yes.
Mayor Candell.
Yes. Okay, moving to the next item, we have our city manager's oral report. Mr. City Manager.
Well, it's been raining. I wanted to acknowledge the hard work our maintenance crews are doing to keep our storm drains clear. I wanted to let folks know there's no law prohibiting them from cleaning some leaves off of the top of a storm drain. We occasionally get calls saying the storm drain's backing up, and we go out there and it's a pile of leaves, and we are more than happy to come out and do that. But in the meantime, people get stressed, and we won't punish you if you brush those leaves off for us. So just a reminder about that fact. And then the other thing I wanted to let the council know is I know the library is in full bloom and super active because nobody can find a parking space at City Hall lately. And it's because it's just exciting to see a lot of vibrant return to our library. I think it's being enjoyed a lot, which is a nice segue into we are making a lot of progress on working out the details for a contract to award. You've chosen who will be awarded the contract for our new library, but now we're working out the details to bring you the actual document. And that process is ongoing, and I'm quite optimistic we'll be bringing it to you within the next 2 to 3 meetings.
Thank you
Turn
very
it back
much.
to you.
Thank you very much. After that, we'll move to our next item, which is council members' reports. Councilmember Carroll on Zoom, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, really only one meeting, and that was the council members and mayors homeless committee meeting. But unfortunately, we're not supposed to talk too much about it. It's a very preliminary exploration of a possible public-private collaboration to try to get the business community more involved in helping the county and the cities deal with the homeless problem. It's very preliminary, but very promising, quite frankly. It's already been done in a community in Texas, and I've followed up with a couple of people down there, and they were very excited about it. So I'm sure there'll be more to come on that in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on the council like to make comments today?
So since we last met last Wednesday, I have a couple things I want to bring up. I did attend the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, a meeting last Thursday, and my first time going to that meeting since it's been in place for a couple of years. Just one thing I found very interesting is a presentation about what's called LADRIS, which is a new evacuation modeling program that they are using, which involves AI. So it's real-time evacuation modeling, and it will be used by law enforcement and our first responders, not by individuals. But the use of AI in that is fascinating to me, how they are getting data, real-time data on what traffic patterns are like, what weather is happening, et cetera, and going to be implementing that program in here. The other thing I wanted everybody to know about, and we have two candidates sitting with us, is that on Monday, the Chamber of Commerce is hosting a Larkspur City Council candidate meet and greet. And it is on Monday, the 29th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Kronos Academy, which is right down the street here on 110 Magnolia Avenue. It's open to the public, and it's a great opportunity to meet the three candidates who are running in the March 5th ballot to replace the seat held by Kevin Haroff, who resigned last year. So Monday, the 29th, please everybody come and have your opportunity to meet our three candidates who are running. That's it.
Thank you. Gabe?
Yeah, nothing this week.
Okay, I have nothing either this week, so I'll move on to public hearings. We have two public hearings this evening. Item 7.1, Resolution 0124, adopting an updated transportation impact analysis threshold as required by CEQA to comply with state mandated changes from level of service to vehicle miles traveled pursuant to SB 743 and CEQA guidelines. Can we get a staff report?
Yes, give me just a moment to get the presentation up here.
There's hard copy.
Yes, and you do have a hard copy. It's in the staff, or it should be printed out for you. So good evening, council members. And as mentioned, tonight's item is the adoption of resolution 01-24 to implement vehicle miles traveled, the vehicle miles traveled metric for CEQA analysis. I'm going to preface all of this by saying that the topic is quite complex, and I'm going to do my best to make it less so. There we go. Just a second here. So today's presentation is organized around the following topics, with the primary objective being to establish baseline knowledge and vocabulary around SB 743 and VMT policy. I'm also going to provide an overview of the VMT analysis process and the proposed screens and thresholds for the city moving forward. So what is SB 743? In short, it changes the focus of transportation impact analysis in CEQA from measuring the impact to the drivers to measuring the impact of the driving itself. The Governor's Office of Planning and Research recommended that vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, be used to measure transportation impacts under CEQA. And that's because that VMT metric can support 3 statutory goals: the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the development of multimodal transportation networks, and a diversity of land uses. One thing I would like to note here is that while level of service will no longer be used to evaluate transportation impacts under CEQA, it is still a part of the city's draft general plan and will still be used to examine and evaluate any impacts related to circulation for any significant development projects in the city. So instead of measuring traffic level of service, we now measure the amount of driving generated by a project using VMT, and VMT provides a measure of travel efficiency of a land use project. It estimates, the estimates are based on regional travel patterns, which reflect transportation infrastructure, transit service, and land use. And historically, the use of level of service in environmental review has moved us further away from local goals and priorities for land use development and economic activity. VMT better connects environmental impact measurements to state greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. So VMT is simply the total number of vehicles traveling times the average miles traveled per vehicle. When calculating the transportation impacts of residential and office projects, OPR, the Office of Planning and Research, recommends using VMT per capita for residential projects and VMT per employee for office projects. A VMT per capita is the total household VMT in an area divided by the total population. And the per employee measurement is the total work trip vehicle miles traveled in an area divided by the total number of employees. In the case of a mixed use project, you would measure each separately. So the following slides provide an overview of the VMT analysis process through CEQA. It looks complicated, but there's just these three main phases we can focus on tonight, which include screening, the VMT thresholds, and VMT mitigations. And this next slide should break them down a little bit better. So VMT-based screens, or the phase one, applies to land use and transportation projects and helps agencies quickly identify low VMT projects which are exempt from analysis. It saves a lot of staff time and streamlines the review process. The VMT-based thresholds, or the second phase there, they provide an objective measure to achieve state greenhouse gas reduction goals and reduce VMT while enabling all communities to still grow. And mitigation, or phase three, requires that projects with significant VMT impacts undergo mitigation to avoid or substantially reduce the impact. Identifying an approach provides guidance to developers while also offering benefits to on-site and neighboring communities. So this table, which is also in the staff report, if you want to look at it a little more closely, this is kind of a reduced version. It shows the recommended VMT screens. The staff recommended VMT screens closely follow OPR guidance and recommendations. However, as you can see in the first row, we differentiate from OPR in that we are suggesting that projects that are located within a half-mile walking distance of high-quality transit are screened out of any further VMT analysis. And this is the table of staff recommendations for defining a significant VMT impact, also in the staff report. In most cases, the staff recommendation follows the recommendations of OPR. The main difference would be that the project effect on VMT element, where OPR suggests using the greater region to assess any increases in VMT, we are suggesting using Marin County because of the urbanized nature of the greater Bay Area, and we feel that would be a more appropriate comparison. And lastly here, just to kind of give you an idea, this is a map from the Transportation Authority, Marin, which shows the existing VMT per resident in different areas of the town. The darker the color there, the more VMT is associated with that particular area. Downtown Larkspur is already more than 15% above the county average, while places like Marin Country Mart and the Bon Air Shopping Center are still beneath the 15% threshold, meaning that projects there could potentially be screened out. So that is all I have for the presentation today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start with council. Any questions? Kevin, if you have questions online, I guess just raise your hand or shout out. I don't want to miss you if you had questions. Okay.
Yeah, I had
Go
a
ahead.
couple things. Well, thanks, Alex, for the concise summary. I'm a little curious about the metric. So I know there's the per capita versus the gross, and per capita makes more sense because it doesn't penalize the size of the project. But why are we talking about vehicle miles traveled, not gallons of gas consumed? Because vehicle miles traveled on the Richmond Bridge at 8 o'clock is different than at 12 o'clock.
Sure, I think it would be harder to estimate the number of gallons of gas consumed just simply by the variations of cars people are using. And with VMT, it's much easier to create travel demand models, and that's what TAM has done to help measure the metric. I don't know that it's probably possible to measure, gallons of gas consumed. I just don't. I couldn't give you specifics on
Okay.
how that might be
So
done.
it's too much statistics. I'm curious also if this affects our transit oriented housing element, or, this is a city council, we're not TAM. How are we plugging into this? Because I know the housing element is looking, for example, if we develop in North Magnolia, the VMT is going to be much different than, down by Marin Mart.
Yeah, so that would be, we would use the map I showed there at the end to determine if screening is necessary. Could you repeat the question? I know I'm not answering.
Yeah, so just to cut to the chase, how is this tool? So we're trying to vote on adopting the metric, right? Which metric to adopt?
Mhm.
And maybe you can clarify that choice one more time. But then what are the applications is really
So-
my question.
So a lot of or as drafted right now, the sites that are in the housing element would be by right projects. And so they wouldn't go through secret review. So this wouldn't apply. If that answers your question.
And so at least where would they apply? Where would
So
we
if,
be
if,
using
for
this?
example, the most likely application would, well, for any project that has some type of review under the California Quality Act, like Magnolia Village had a VMT analysis.
Mm.
Any sort of commercial project that isn't screened out, so a really, really large, like a grocery store over 50,000 square feet would need to do an analysis. And then other unusual projects, like a hotel might need to do an analysis, and they would probably be bringing employees in to work. So they might have a higher VMT than other uses. And those projects would then need to do some sort of mitigation, like, we don't have a list of those yet, but for example, they could give out free passes to use the train or things like that to mitigate their increased vehicle miles traveled.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yep, thanks.
So Alex, where did the 1/2 mile walking distance come from? I'm thinking for a lot of our seniors, a 1/2 mile is further than many of them can do on our hilly sides.
So I believe that Tam recommended, I believe the 1/2 mile.
The 1/2 mile?
And then.
Or so the 1/2 mile is sort of a commonly used threshold for, I guess in general, walkability around mass transit. So they're encouraging more
Yeah.
dense areas. We put in the walkable because that 1/2 mile includes the high hillside areas of Greenbrae Hills, which are actually more than a 1/2 mile of walking distance. And so we just thought it was more appropriate to have 1/2 mile walking distance because in reality, some of the areas that 1/2 mile captures are much greater than 1/2 mile away.
Okay. So,
But at the 1/2 mile that they use, I think it's probably relates to my guess is a time period for walking certain places and what's reasonable for people to walk.
Yeah.
And it's true, like for certain people aren't going to walk that far, but other people can.
yeah,
So
I know half.
s-
Oh, go
Would it
ahead.
be fair, so people don't get confused? The standard is as the crow flies, we're proposing measuring
Walking.
path of travel.
Correct.
Okay, that helps, because I noticed on page 3, it says walking distance recommended due to hillside topography in areas of Larkspur, which you just explained for that. Ferry terminal and train station and highway bisecting community that limits direct access to transit. So I just was wondering where the 1/2 mile, I know 1/2 mile has been, when we did the station area plan and other things, a 1/2 mile of transit is sort of the norm. I'm just making sure we're aware that a lot of people, 1/2 mile is still pretty far for them. So that answers the question though. Thank you, Elise.
Any other questions?
No.
Gabe, any other questions? Kevin, any questions?
Yes, so Catherine already got to the one that I was most interested in. I am curious if this is another do as we say and not as we do. Are they gonna have to, is the county gonna have to do this type of metric on Oak Hill? And will the state have to do it on San Quentin?
Yes, this is going to be the methodology moving forward for everybody, is my understanding.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and I'm sorry, I just have one question. I'm curious about how much of what we are passing here is discretionary and how much is required by state law to come into compliance?
So the state law, I think pretty much all of it is required. Yeah, I don't know that there's,
We have to use VMT as a threshold now for CEQA. That's just the law now. but we have some discretion in where to place the thresholds.
So for
or
example, if
that
we wanted to
analysis.
say a quarter of a mile instead of half a mile, we would have the ability to do that?
We probably would and would need some analysis to make sure that it passes. That would probably be a good question for the attorneys that are looking at the CEQA threshold. They have to be, we don't, if we have a not very good threshold, then we're subject to litigation over the threshold. So,
So the safest thing
We'd have
for
to
the
show-
city would be to do exactly in
yeah,
compliance with the state.
we'd have to, if we were changing anything, we just need to show that we're not making it less restrictive in a way that is going to be contributing to greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay.
That's just a, if I could jump in, that's always a good rule of thumb when you're thinking about anything that's related to state direction or state regulation. You probably can make it more restrictive. You can't make it less restrictive.
Got it.
So one of the, you know, decision points here is this resolution is asking us to implement per capita VMT. We could have done the gross number too, right? I mean, that the resolution could have been written that way as well.
There are options on how to measure it. So yeah, we had some flexibility in which,
Which
Which
I'm
threshold?
not challenging it. I just for clarification, just, you know, what we're actually trying to vote on today is, you know, when you guys got a range of choices, one of the choices is how you measure VMT. And so staff has decided that per capita is the better way to measure VMT, and that's what we'd be voting on. If someone voted no, it might be because they think gross is it. Just wanted to be clear. Are there any other important decision points? I think so. That's what Mayor Candela was asking, because it's not entirely clear what, you know, what the decisions are in here. I mean, that one was quite clear from the report.
Yes, so the decisions are basically to adopt VMT as the metric and then set the screens to exempt projects from VMT analysis and then set the thresholds.
Okay.
That phase 2 that I was showing.
So we
earlier.
could say a 20%, but we're saying 15 here.
Yes.
Okay, good. I won't ask anymore.
I did want to make sure for the record, for folks who haven't had a chance to digest all of this material, the staff recommendations for a lot of the methodology are based on considerable work that was done at TAM to model these things out. So it's not arbitrary. It's been quite data driven in a lot of the recommendations.
Okay, any other questions from council? All right, let me open it up to people who are present here in the gallery. Are there any questions that you have for staff? Come on up.
James Holmes, Larkspur. I too, my focus was essentially consistent with Councilmember Candel's in that I think we should preserve as much discretion as we can. My understanding of the walking distance is that it's a good call because it is not as expansive as just 1.5 miles the crow flies. I hope that's a correct understanding. There's a lot, looking at the summary of VMT screening recommendations, there are a lot of things that are screened out of here. And so I wonder if all of these are, I mean, should we really screen out 100% affordable housing? Should we really screen out 15%? I just wonder if there is any way that we can be a little bit less expansive. I wonder if has there been any investigation as to what other localities are doing, and are there any other localities which are opting for anything less expansive? If so, we might want to consult with them and see what kind of analyses they have undertaken. And in terms of the criteria for significant impact, I would certainly agree it makes more sense to use Marin County VMT rather than regional. I wonder if we can use a smaller area because Marin County includes San Rafael and parts of Nevada, but particularly San Rafael, which is quite a bit different than most of Larkspur. So again, I just think we should keep our powder dry as much as we can, and we should keep in mind that VMT is something which is literally being slammed down our throats, and it is really much more expansive, I believe, than the former level of service that we have used for years. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Can I ask staff, Dan, if you feel comfortable? I know you said staff did a lot of work and research to come up with these numbers, to do our due diligence. Can you just give us a little bit of an expanse on that, kind of what the process was like, so we understand?
Well, I'll give you what I know. I think Elise probably has a lot more background than me, but I think TAM first started asking for financial support from the agencies in Marin County like 5 years ago to start doing modeling to help inform a VMT model for. So we've known for quite a while this trend was happening. In fact, I suspect some or all of you recall former Councilmember Hoff was quite unhappy about this model. And I think that was before COVID. He knew this was coming and he was already very frustrated because he was I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I recall him being very supportive of level of service analysis. And this, as the last speaker said, this is a big shift in philosophy from that approach to measuring traffic. And so we've all been commissioning analysis from TAM for the Transportation Authority of Marin, I think for about 5 years. And they've essentially been funding a pretty interesting database. I'm going to get this probably partly wrong because it's pretty high tech, but I think they worked with a lot of services like Amazon, UPS, FedEx, and they started tracking where people were moving. And then, as some of us know now, the cell phone companies are now making people movement analysis available, anonymized, so we don't know individuals. But that really made doing VMT analysis much more viable. So I think, when you hear Alex and say that collectively the agencies in the county are looking more at Marin as a county versus looking at the Bay Area, they have now the data to show that traffic movement in Marin is distinct from the rest of the Bay Area, and they could feel comfortable making that sort of recommendation to you. And that's something to not forget before I turn over to Elise, who may want to expand on this. We don't want to go too far afield of what our colleagues around Marin are doing, because one of our goals with development has been to try to be, when possible, as consistent with the other Marin agencies as possible. And so I'm going to ask Elise if there's anything you want to add or Alex wants to add about.
And you don't
what's
have
been
to, just if there's
affirmed.
any other thing you want to do, you can feel free to jump in. And seeing no one jumping up to answer, go ahead.
I mean, I will just say that to my knowledge, most municipalities in Marin County are setting very similar thresholds and screens. And yes, there's been a lot of work with TAM and with MTC for several years. I think the implementation of this was supposed to be in 2018 or 2017. That's right about when the whole process kicked off.
Okay. All right, thank you. Is there anyone else in the chamber that would like to ask a question or comment on this item? Seeing none, is there anybody online who would like to question or comment on this item?
I'm looking for any raised hands from the audience members on Zoom, and there's no public comment.
Okay, with that, I will close public comment and bring it back up to the council here. Any comments before we ask for a vote? Okay, does anybody like to make a motion?
I'd like to move resolution 01/24, adopting updated transportation impact analysis thresholds as required by CEQA.
I'll second that.
Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Carroll,
Yes,
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Way,
Yes.
Mayor Kendall.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Let's move on to public hearing 7.2, public hearing for the sanitary, Marin sanitary service rates and recycling collection for 2024. Can we get a staff report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, before I begin my staff report, I want to note that on the dais, published online as well, is a revised copy of the resolution you'll be considering as part of this public hearing. The city attorney's office realized staff was relying on an older template that we've been using for several years, and it was missing some language that belonged in the resolution. So they updated it for us. For those in the chamber, I hope there's some copies in the back table, should folks be interested. It doesn't significantly change the action you're taking tonight. It provides a little more information and context within the verbiage. So with that, I'll be very brief. The purpose this evening is to convene a public hearing for the annual consideration of the rates that are going to be charged by Marin Sanitary, your franchisor for solid waste hauling in Larkspur. The hearing, we often include a presentation from our consultant. The council and public may recall that due to the scheduling challenges of the same consultant doing the same presentation for multiple jurisdictions in Marin, we scheduled this presentation and had this presentation on October 18th of 2023. At that time, we thought we'd be holding this hearing in November. We found some issues we wanted to refine, and so we postponed the hearing to today. With that said, as the council is aware and is provided in the staff report, Larkspur, along with all of the agencies who are customers, if you will, of Marin Sanitary, work collaboratively to analyze the costs that Marin Sanitary incurs to provide this service throughout the various communities where they serve. And that's been done for quite a few years in order to save costs rather than each of the jurisdictions paying the same consultant on a separate agreement, and rather than the sanitary agency needing to have meetings with each agency to negotiate the rates. We've done as much as we can collectively to save the ratepayer money. And that's worked very well and served us very well. You'll see in the staff report, we make a distinction between what we call the franchisors group, and then there actually are a few other agencies listed. Today, that's probably a blurry line, but the reason there's that distinction is that there's sort of the 5 members, 5 agencies whose contracts are substantially the same. They were and have all been Marin Sanitary customers for quite a long time. There were some other agencies, most notably San Anselmo and Fairfax, who only became customers of Marin Sanitary within the last decade. And so their contracts are a little different, but they sit with us and participate in this process. And that's why you see them listed, but you see the staff report refers to a franchisors group that they're not listed in. The most significant thing that you heard in the presentation that I'll remind the council is that you commissioned, as did other customers of Marin Sanitary, a new analysis of the way the rates were being charged. And you did this in 2019. Before that, we had a very convoluted process. And those who were on the council back then can recall the rate hearing often involved a good hour to 2 hours of going into the minutia of that year's application. What we tried to do was create a system that was more standardized, that accounted for fluctuations more consistently and might smooth costs, because part of the challenge in setting rates is to analyze how the economy and costs are affecting the ability for the franchisor to serve the community. That new methodologies work pretty well in terms of smoothing, and that's borne out by the fact that this year's proposed rate increase is very similar to last year's proposed rate increase. And the rate increase being contemplated this year is 5.96% for Larkspur. And you'll see how that rate increase plays out in the schedule of rates, which is attached as an exhibit to the resolution you're considering this evening. That is the entirety of the presentation I have. I will incorporate by reference the October 18th presentation, the staff report, and you also had the Marin Sanitary folks were here at that meeting to answer your questions at that time. I'm available to provide any information you require to conduct your public hearing, and then you need to open it up and take comment.
Okay, Thank you very much, Mr. City Manager. Let's start with city council members. Anybody have any questions for our staff? Let's start with Councilmember Carroll. Just to make sure I don't miss you. We got a shake of the head. Anybody here on the dais have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, just real quick, I'm wondering if the city manager or attorney can comment. I've read over the public comment, the cost letter, and it was on the second page saying that the profit calculation is 565,000, and that they were set with regard to road usage fee, and they're is charged under a separate category. Can you just comment on that? I don't think I was able to drill down into the report and see that.
Let me call up that comment for a moment, please.
Yeah.
So if you could help me identify.
Sure. So it's the
That's,
I have the. I have
yeah,
the
it's
letter
on the
from
second
it.
page. It's the
Uh-huh.
second paragraph. So it says in the rate hearings today, the consultant report indicates the proposed fees will result in 565 grand, et cetera.
Yeah, so this is a terminology issue. I would never use the word profit the way cost is using it in this letter. I think what they're referring to are franchise fees being paid by the franchisor to the city for the use of its public right of way for the purpose of delivering its service. And that number that they're citing is, I believe, the franchise fee amount.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, I have one question, which is, my understanding is we have a long-term contract, which has fee raises built into it. So I am curious, I mean, it seems that if we don't abide by our contract, we're in violation of the contract. So do we really have discretion to not accept this? I mean, it seems like we've already kind of negotiated this, and so I'm just trying to understand what we really have the discretion to do at this point without violating our agreement.
So I first want to say we don't have a contract that says you get a fee raise every year. We have a agreement that we will apply a methodology that takes into consideration the cost of service on the part of the hauler to provide the service to the community. As part of that, they are entitled to a fair return to operate and do business, and that's built into the methodology as well. If that miracle year happens where their costs go down, and I concede, I don't know that in my tenure they've ever gone down. They've been fairly flat a couple of years, and we've had very nominal increases in fees. Then the fees don't go up. They don't automatically go up. They move with costs. In defense of the whole process and frankly, the whole waste hauling system around the state of California, I think if the hauler was here this evening, what they would remind everybody is they are one of the most regulated industries of the state of California. They have multiple regulatory agencies that pretty much every year raise the bar on what's required of them to meet clean air, clean water, how they do recycling, where they can do recycling. And all these things just keep pushing costs up. Most meetings I've participated in are actually dealing with new regulation when I meet with the hauler. So I just want to make sure that's clear. So to your question, do you have much discretion? If you felt that there was an error in the work done by the consultant that we commissioned to analyze the rates, then your discretion would be to send us back to work with the hauler to work on a particular area within the rate analysis that you feel was flawed. If you feel that the methodology was correct, then essentially your representative, which is either me or the assistant city manager, acted in good faith working from that methodology that your predecessors contractually bound the city to. So you wouldn't want to violate that good faith effort. So if you do, as part of this hearing, have concerns about the way the methodology was applied, then that would be the discussion point to have.
Okay, you have answered my question. Thank you. Any other questions from council members? Okay, let me open it up to the public. Anyone in the public? James, come on up.
James Holmes, Larkspur. To follow up on the mayor's comment, the new rate system was adopted in 2019. We are not bound to that rate system forever. Documentation from that time indicates that after 5 years, there was supposed to be an in-depth evaluation of how the index compared to the actual costs and revenues. If the system was implemented starting in 2020, then that evaluation should take place next year. Will it? In any case, the new system hasn't made much of a significant difference in the overall cost. Before it was adopted, a staff report from 2018, 2019 said the 15-year average annual increase was 5.19%. Under the new system, annual increases are steadily approaching 6%. The key issue we need to look at as part of an examination is whether the current index we are using is reasonable. That index includes water and sewer costs as well as trash collection. Water and sewer isn't really related to trash collection. Can water and sewer be backed out? What other indices do other cities use, especially cities with consistently lower rates like Corte Madera? We do know that one index doesn't, that our index doesn't correlate with one cost, and that is interest rates, because interest rates go up and down, but water and sewer never decrease. Similarly, the index is being applied to tipping fees and recycling fees. Is there a reasonable correlation there? Bottom line, we need to know what the spread is and who is making money off of it. A couple of other oddities: recycling cost is based on 2018 customer base, the recycler's customer base for 2018. Shouldn't that be a more reasonable base? Would using a more reasonable, a more recent base raise or lower rates? Similarly, the all-important recalculation back to prior years compares 2021 and 2022. In that case, the documentation shows Marin Sanitary had a 2022 surplus of $89,123, which it has held now until 2024. We should require a more recent look back based on 2023 versus 2022. Finally, looking at the rate comparison at the back of the consultant's report. First question, does the rate comparison include franchise fees? It should not include franchise fees. It should exclude franchise fees so that we are actually comparing rate apples to apples. And finally, as usual, the rate comparison shows that the Corte Madera rates are significantly lower than Larkspur's. They have another provider, another contract, despite the similarities in the two cities' size and terrain. Corte Madera, in fact, has the second lowest rate in the comparison. What does Corte Madera know, or what do they do that we don't? Do they use a different formula, a different index, or allow for a lower profit? In evaluating our system when we do it, which we should no later than next year, Larkspur should really focus on Corte Madera, talk to their people, and find out why they always have, why their rate is always lower, and what we can do to learn from Corte Madera. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Any other comment from the public here in chambers? Okay, seeing none, let's turn to Zoom. Any public comment on Zoom?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our Zoom audience members, and there's no public comment.
Okay, having no further public comment, I will close public comment. And I see our city manager looking as if he has something to say. So, Mr. City Manager.
I just thought maybe it should provide a few comments based on the speaker's comments. So,
Okay.
Yes, the city and Marin Sanitary and the other agencies that work with Marin Sanitary will follow the methodology that we all agreed to and contractually bound ourselves to, and there will be a full evaluation of the methodology after the 5th year. We haven't reached that point yet. So that people can be assured will happen. R3 is one of a handful of consulting firms that specializes in this type of analysis. Their methodology is frankly one of the industry standards, and everything that's included, including the variables cited by the speaker, are standard variables for this type of analysis. With respect to the differences in these different rates, it's hard to unpack the differences between two different haulers and how they generate their rates. And then it's difficult to unpack the different fees that each of the agencies has applied, both within the same hauler and across haulers. Those would all have to be unpacked to start to get at some of these issues that the speaker's saying he'd like to know about comparing the two. And the question would, of course, be what's the end purpose of that? And if the council would like us to do that at some later date, I'm happy to do that. I'm actually quite familiar with Corte Madeira's agreement, and I've had numerous conversations over the years about the difference between our hauler and their hauler and our agreement and their agreement. And I don't think there's a simple pivot to an agreement. It's not apples to apples to say we could just do what Corte Madera does. We'd have to look at changing haulers. And of course, as some of you may recall, you have a 20-year evergreen clause in your agreement. So you'd have to terminate your agreement, and your successors 20 years from now could pick a new hauler. So you're welcome, which, you know, certainly could discuss that if you wanted to. The other trigger someday will be if the hauler sells their operation. That would trigger reopening of the agreement.
Quick question, the city manager. So the 5-year reevaluation period is next January?
We will start working on that this year. It won't be probably put in effect, if I recall, until the rate hearings in 2025.
Okay.
So it'd take effect for 26, I think. I'd have to look at the calendar to be sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Holmes, for that. I appreciate that. And I guess now is really not the time to review the methodology that's coming up in another year or so, but I look forward to that conversation as well. Having said that, any other comments from council, either online or present? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Okay, so moved.
All right, so we have a motion to pass item 7.2, Marin Sanitary Service Rates and Recycling Collection for 2024. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, having a motion and a second, could we get a roll call?
Councilmember Carroll,
Yes,
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Way.
Yes.
Mayor Candell.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. We'll now move on to business items. We have one business item, 8.1, City Council appointments. As the mayor, it is my responsibility to appoint people to different committees. So I have done that. I have given that list to the city manager and the city clerk. I believe that list is posted online if people would like to review it. And I guess we have copies here. Does anybody have any discussion about that, either Councilmember Carroll or any council members here in the council? Hearing
Nope.
none, is there anyone from the audience who has a question or comment on that? In the chamber, seeing none, online?
Any raised hands from our Zoom audience members? And there's no public comment.
Okay, seeing none, I will close business item 8.1. Next item on our agenda is adjournment. Before I do that, city manager has something to tell us.
Yeah, so historically, the mayor asked the council to ratify by vote the
Got it.
appointment.
All right, let me rewind. Go back to 8.1. There is the city council appointments. Everybody has a copy of it. Can I ask council member to make a motion to ratify the appointments?
Sure, I'll make that motion.
Okay, can I get a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Carroll,
yes,
Councilmember Paulson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Way.
Yes.
Mayor Kendall.
Yes. And let me just throw out there a couple things. First of all, at any time, any council member would like to change their appointments, please just let me know. These are flexible and fluid. And I would also like to point out that we will have a new council member sitting with us starting in March. So we will adjust those appointments accordingly at that point. And Mr. City Manager, is there something you'd like to add?
Nope, sounds good, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add before we wrap this up? Okay, moving on to item number 9, adjournment. Thank you very much for a wonderful evening. Meeting adjourned.